Hello Internet, and welcome to my live reaction for Black Butler, chapter 190. When we last left our heroes, Baldroy was, on the cusp of heaven, I think. He had this vision of his wife and son in this, golden wheat field that's very reminiscent of, the Future Lucy ending in Fairy Tale. And before he can go to her, he tells her about being, a chef or an aristocrat, and Sebastian appears. And he gives this line about how, Baldroy shouldn't talk about that until he can actually cook good, which he very much can't. And it felt like it might be a sort of, Sebastian barring him from heaven in sort of either you're not allowed to die yet, or the theory I kind of posited is is Baldroy wrapped up in some kind of subcontract because he works for RCL, who has the contract with Sebastian, and he's, physically barred from heaven for the same reason that CL will have to give up his soul to Sebastian at some point. I don't know. Because before we can find out, Baldroy, the ground crumbles beneath him and he falls into a void, pulled down by, Ada and Lau and some of the Sanatorium patients. And that's where we leave off. So with that said, let's dive right on in chapter 190, The Butler, A Brief Respite. And our picture here is of Ada holding on to, a bloodied coat, I think. The will of Nightingale does not sway. Oh, it's might be tied in with the sort of thing that Florence Nightingale would have worn, tying into Ada's medical philosophy. But we open with Baldroy again, as his arm twitches and he's surrounded by loaves of bread with wings, which maybe ties into the wheat field imagery. Wasn't he a wheat farmer in particular? Because bread comes from wheat, of course. It's fluffy and warm. Is this heaven? And we see an old man start to form in his vision. Are you God? And it's one of the old guys at the sanitarium. Who's God? I haven't gone to heaven yet. And Baldroy just wakes up. He is in his, hospital bed, surrounded by people. Is that really it? Because, here's the thing. 188 gave us the puzzle pieces we needed to, it's two problems. If this is actually Baldroy awake and not just, a dream within a dream kind of thing that we're going for here, is that while 188 gave us the pieces we needed to show how Baldroy might survive by Layla's reveal that Baldroy and Lau have the same blood type, my problem with that is that we still needed a bit of a dramatic arc there of Lau, being torn between the mission and Baldroy and choosing Baldroy, and having him just say, all right, I'll save Baldroy and let Layla go, without any dramatic arc whatsoever, feels kind of cheap. And also, last chapter felt my complaint of last chapter is that it felt like the first 10 pages of a 40-page chapter that would really dig into Baldroy as he, faces his mortality, and chooses between life and death. And we don't get that either. We get the weird bread heaven, and he's back to life. So we'll see if there's a little more to it than my initial assumption, but I'm not big on this chapter in the early goings. Anyway, Baldroy looks around. And it's Lau, I think, who says, "You killed in wars, yet you thought you'd gone to heaven. How could Occidentals be so shameless?" And yeah, we see he's hooked up to a blood extraction machine to save Baldroy. Well, hello. Welcome to hell again. Me every week when Yana gives us, every month when Yana gives us nothing. But we see both Baldroy and Lau are hooked up to blood draining / blood giving machines. And Baldroy looks over, what's this? And Ada walks in and tells him, "You suffered massive bleeding from arterial injury. You were about to die. Your blood was all over your clothes and the sanatorium floor. So, we asked for volunteers to give their blood to you." And so, okay. Lau goes on, "My blood was Canopus, the same as Master Cook. And, like, I would have liked it maybe a little more if, A, we had really focused on the bonds between Baldroy and the sanatorium patients, because we did a little bit of that at the beginning, but not a whole lot. And that was, like, over a year ago at this point. And B, it had actually been the guys who did it. The patients. It's sort of, while I wouldn't quite like it given, like, the things we were promised the past couple months, it would work a little better. It would work a little better just to, like, make there be some sort of thematic something that saves Baldroy, instead of just Yano walks back Baldroy's death, the first time something had happened in this manga in a long time. But Lao monologues, Orientals and Occidentals, the color of our eyes, the pots we cook with, everything about us is different, yet our blood is the same. How curious. Which, given the sort of race problems I have with Baldroy's flashback, I don't think it's really meant to be a sort of tacit apology for that, but that sort of is in the back of my mind as I read that. But the patients all laugh at Baldroy's comments, and Baldroy just thinks, I survived, yet again. And then one of, like, the younger patients whispers over at Baldroy, hey bro, I told you, you'd recover for sure, because the miracle healer's here. And, like, we have this image of Ada in her, like, nun's robes, in front of this stained glass window. It's a cool little image. Like, again, Yana's art is never really the problem here. It's, it's not even that Baldroy lived. I would not have had a problem if Baldroy lived. I wish there was just, like, more to Baldroy living than Baldroy just didn't die. Like, that's the part that really grinds my gears. We don't get really anything. There's no heft to it. There's no exploration of anything. Thematically, characterly, nothing. It's just, alright, he's back. No big deal. Like, it's just sort of, is kind of sad. It's kind of pathetic, honestly. And Baldroy just laughs. You're right. And Ada looks at him, kind of puzzled at that, as Baldroy thinks, the technology of young master's enemies saved me. What an ironic twist of fate. And the younger patient from earlier comments, so this is how our blood was being used. I'm glad you can keep on thinking that after everything Ada did. And then the old man, even this old man's blood can save someone. And Ada then tells them all, yes, with this machine, we can save patients we could not save before. However, Athena Sanatorium for former servicemen must be closed immediately. It's time to say goodbye. So, now that we're done with the Baldroy cop-out, it's time to deal with the actual plot of the mini-arc, as Ada is following through on her promise to close Athena, though we'll see if, like, Baldroy... I guess Baldroy doesn't really have the power to, like, offer a workaround here. He doesn't really have CL's resources anymore, given that CL has lost his fortune. I don't know. But the patients all react, no! What do you mean this place... What do you mean this place is closing? I can't walk properly yet. No one would hire an old man like me. What do we do next? And Ada is still having this little, like, crisis of conscience. Due to the two... there is a very compelling, like... problem for Ada. Do I, continue to take money from the Aurora Society and fuck with things in the outside world but save my patients, or do I abandon my patients and stop the Aurora Society? And as she says here, I can't do it. I cannot abandon patients who still require care. I'll stay here until I find facilities that would accept them. But Baldroy stops her. Don't be a fool. They'd kill you next time. And Lao, who, sort of saw Baldroy as kind of weak-willed, not really able to do the sort of things that need doing, and his refusal to kill Ada. He's shocked to see Baldroy take a different, not like a contradictory stance here, but the more ruthless one. When the organization realizes what has happened, they'll send in someone new. You should hide immediately. And then Lao interrupts, then, how about you all come to Shanghai? And that gets everyone's attention. Not really expecting that. The miracle healer, the technology of immortality. I was rather dubious all this time. But because the soft-hearted master cook risked his life for someone else, I was able to witness the miracle with my own eyes. I was truly moved. This is a dragon's egg indeed. My homeland would surely welcome all of you. And I do like the dichotomy here. We see, Lau's outward-facing persona. I'm going to be magnanimous. Baldroy inspired me to be a better person. And we see his real thoughts. A new technology and its operators. And subjects that are easy to handle. If I can make them all mine, the elders would spare no money. And he goes on outwardly. Miss Chief Nurse will not be killed, and the patients need not beg on the streets. The organization will not take the trouble of chasing you all the way to Shanghai, and I would get the credit. It's a win-win scenario. I made the right decision by rescuing the Earl. It was worth coming to a remote countryside like this. So Lau is actually, that bit about I would get the credit is, somewhat honest from Lau. He is admitting that, part of what he wants is the prestige and Qingbang of bringing Ada to Shanghai. And Ada, grabs his hand, still not knowing his real name, Dr. Cheng. And Lau forgets for a moment. Now I remember. That's my assumed name here. I am much obliged. And we see tears fall as Ada just weeps. I am so grateful. And everyone is happy to hear the news. From the patients to the nurses. And Baldroy just looks on them happily and looks up to the sky. And thinks, and just murmurs to himself, I'll learn how to bake a pie by the time we meet again. So wait for me a little while longer. And then we cut to Layla, who we just sort of left hanging last month. We didn't really check in on her at all. She stumbles in the woods crying, "Why, Al? You promised you wouldn't leave me alone." And someone then tells her, "I'm sorry to keep you waiting." And it's Ronald Knox, the last little loose thread from this plotline. Found you. And we get a shot of the sky as the birds fly away. To be continued. Okay. So, this chapter, as I believe I made clear, the way they, it's not that I didn't want Baldroy to survive. It's just that I've been complaining for how long this arc has gone on for, years now, so maybe it's a bit hypocritical to say this, but I wish we had either seen more time with Baldroy in his little, near-death experience, getting some, character work dragged out of him to wrap up Baldroy's little mini-arc here, or some time spent with Lau as he has to decide which he wants, finish the mission or save Baldroy. I wish we had had any kind of narrative arc around Baldroy's survival at all. Instead, the closest thing we get to last chapter being even semi-relevant is Baldroy's "I'll learn how to bake a pie by the time we meet again, so wait for me a little while longer" that he says to Joanna, the Joanna in his mind. And that's just not a lot. That's gonna be a disappointment that stings for a while, I think. Because 188 was such a step above what Yana's normally been putting out the past few years that it got my attention, and then nothing it brought up really came up again. With the exception of Layla, who I will talk about, because really, the rest of the chapter really does work for me. It has the go-to problem that Butler always has of pacing itself like a 40-page chapter, while this time being a whole half that length, as opposed to the normal quarter that length. But it still is a problem either way. And it's one that Yana seems increasingly unconcerned with, rectifying. We've had a few more 20-page chapters than we've had, during the Mei Rin stuff, but it's still a problem. Let's see, what else is there? There are, genuinely good things here. I do like the bit with Lau, as he has this sort of, I'm doing this all to help you out, but also, if I get you in my clutches, that bumps up my position in the Qingbang, which, you know, Lao is not a good man. We all know Lao is not a good guy, and I do like the sort of reminder that even when he acts good, there is this sort of, like, there is something in it for him, that he is manipulating events to his benefit. And Ada, of course, is not concerned with that at all. You know, like, she's, like, Lao isn't even threatening to hurt her here. It's just, like, he's helping her to help him. And Ada couldn't care less. And Ada's a character I've continued to really like. You know, it seems like we're sort of, you know, she's exiting stage left. We're not really going to see her again. If she's in Shanghai for, like, the rest of time. As opposed to Jane, who sort of played a similar role in the May Rin arc, except being less interesting and being teased to actually come back. Which, you know, one of these days, Yana might get her fucking priorities in order. On a lot of other things, too. But still, as a capstone to Ada's arc, well, I don't know. Because, like, I appreciate that she stuck to her belief that she must protect her patients no matter what, and was rewarded. There's a certain, like, One Piece energy to that, in the ways that, like, when characters hold to their firmly held beliefs in One Piece, even if it seems to bother them, even if it seems to harm them in the short term, they're always rewarded in the end. Like, Enel being the one villain to win, or you know, the way the narrative rewards Sanji in Onigashima for calling for Robin's help in the Black Maria fight. It's kind of a similar energy we see from Ada here, and I do like it in One Piece, and it works here. But it just does end up... I think my real problem with this whole chapter is an overall lack of conflict. You know, as opposed to sort of the conflict reaching a climax and then a natural denouement, it feels like we've kind of skipped a climax on a lot of these plot threads to go straight to denouement. That's the problem, now that I put it into words. You know, we don't get a climax on Baldroy's survival. We don't get a climax on Ada's little, you know, narrative arc. It just feels like there's some more climax that was needed here. You know, given how this whole slew of subplots has been, I don't mind it going a little fast, but it does feel like we just skipped over the climax, which was not the thing that should have been skipped. We could have skipped some of the little details in the Baldroy flashback, not the climax for both Baldroy's little, you know, storyline here and Ada's character arc. It just feels like that there is something left behind. I don't know. Though, speaking of things not left behind, I hope that next month we'll finally find out what the hell Ronald Knox was doing here, how that ties into Layla and the Undertaker. That's the sort of thing that, like, you know, even when I'm ragging on a chapter, like I kind of was today, there's always these little bits of greatness buried, sometimes very deep within Butler, but it's still there. You can still see them. That just makes me want to come back for more. And we see that here because, you know, we've sort of been wondering for a couple years at this point, what is Knox doing at Athena? And maybe we're gonna finally find out. So that's exciting. But beyond that, it's a bit of a mixed bag of a chapter for me. I think it really does come down to we needed more climax before we got to this kind of denouement section, which is a pain, but it is what it is at this point. So let's hope the ending of this arc is good. You know, this arc as a whole is better than the May Rin stuff, and I hope that the ending at least keeps that up. It occasionally flirted with greatness, and maybe it will flirt with greatness again in the end. So with that said, I'm going to leave this video off here. Hope you'll enjoy the chapter and the video itself. If you did, feel free to drop me a like or subscribe, or, you know, do whatever makes you happy, you know? And as always, your life is your own, okay? Bye!